My name is Susan. I'm 24 years old. And when I was 12, my parents abandoned me like I was just another bill they could no longer afford to pay. I still remember the rain that afternoon. It wasn't a dramatic storm, just a quiet, persistent drizzle that matched the hollow feeling building in my chest. We were sitting in the living room, Mom on the recliner, Dad standing near the window, and me clutching the armrest of the couch like it could anchor me to something real. Lucy, my little sister, wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. She was probably upstairs drawing rainbows or practicing piano, the perfect child, the golden girl. I had always known I was different. Not bad, not rebellious, just unseen. Dad, what's going on? I had asked when I noticed how stiff the room felt. He didn't turn around. He just sighed. That kind of sigh you hear when someone's already made a decision and hates that you're about to fight it. Mom folded her hands in her lap and looked at me with what I now know as guilt, but back then, it just looked like irritation. Susan, she said, we need to talk. That phrase, so harmless, yet so heavy. We need to talk usually precedes breakups, not betrayals that break a child's life into pieces. We're going through a difficult time, Dad finally said, still facing the window. Financially, we can't keep up. The bills, the mortgage. And, I said, I was 12, not stupid. Mom cut in, we've decided. It's best if you go stay somewhere else. Temporarily. My world cracked. Somewhere else? What do you mean, like grandma's? They exchanged a look, and that's when I knew. It was planned. Talked about. Agreed upon. Like a business transaction. No, honey. A home. A foster home, Mom said. I stopped breathing for a moment. I genuinely forgot how. A foster home? Like I was being outsourced? Traded in? Why me? I asked. Why not Lucy? That question should have been left unspoken. The silence that followed was worse than any answer they could have given. But then Mom said it in the coldest, most calculated tone I've ever heard from her. Lucy needs stability. She's excelling at school. This won't be good for her development. And there it was. The truth. I was disposable. Inconvenient. A disruption to Lucy's development. I was 12. I had no say. No lawyer. No ally. I packed a single duffel bag, my favorite hoodie, a pair of jeans, my copy of End of Green Gables, and a small photo of our family I didn't yet know I'd soon hate looking at. The day they dropped me off, I sat in the back seat of the car, silent. The ride felt like a funeral procession, and I was the only one mourning. The house wasn't terrible. Mrs. Miller, the foster mom, was kind, warm, and patient. But no one can replace a family that's still alive but pretends you don't exist. She had tea waiting. A cozy bedroom with flowered sheets. Pancakes the next morning. But it didn't matter. Because the people I loved most left me like a dog at a shelter. At night, I stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out how I had failed. I wasn't brilliant like Lucy, but I was kind. I never talked back. I did my chores. I tried to be invisible, thinking that would make me easier to love. It didn't. I waited every single day for a call. A message. A visit. None came. And then, about a month in, I found out through social media that they'd gone on a beach vacation, all three of them. The caption beneath the photo said, "Finally found peace." Peace. I was the war they had to leave behind. That's when the first spark of anger lit in me. A small flame. Nothing yet, but enough to start shaping me into someone who could survive. Someone who would never need them again. Mrs. Miller tried. She really did. She would leave little notes in my lunchbox. She signed me up for art classes. She even took me to school plays, so I could feel normal again. I didn't always say thank you, but I noticed. And slowly, I began to realize maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe they were. I started journaling at night, writing down my dreams, my goals, and one recurring phrase. One day, they'll regret this. And I meant it. By the time I was 15, I had developed a resilience that most people never find. I got a job shelving books at the local library. I studied relentlessly. I joined debate club and found my voice sharp, clear, and impossible to ignore. Every success, every A on a test, every dollar I earned, I logged into a mental file labeled proof I never needed them. When I got into university on a full scholarship, I didn't tell them. When I moved to the city for school and started working 2 jobs, I didn't ask them for help. When I stood on the stage and accepted my honors degree, I didn't scan the crowd hoping they were there. But they were. And I'll never forget the look on their faces when they saw me, successful, radiant, completely untouchable. Mom tried to speak first. Susan, you did so well. We're proud of you. I didn't even flinch. Why are you here? I asked, calm and cold. We just want to reconnect. It's your big day, Dad added. My big day? After 12 years of silence? No. This is my day. Not yours. Lucy was there too, and shockingly, she didn't defend them. Mom. Dad. We can't keep pretending. You abandoned her, she said, her voice steady. You lied to me. You lied to everyone. Susan made it without you. And you don't get to show up now like nothing happened. It was the first time anyone stood up for me. They had nothing left to say. And I had nothing left to give. But it wasn't over yet. Because a few years later, broke and desperate, they came begging for money. And that, dear listener, is when the Betrayal story begins. The first time they reached out again, I didn't even recognize the number. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was in the small, sunlit office I had rented for my nonprofit. The place still smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. My phone buzzed once. A message. Susan, it's Mom. Can we talk? Please. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Not moving. Not breathing. Like my body wasn't sure if it wanted to vomit or scream. I didn't respond. I didn't even delete it. I just locked my phone and sat there, blinking back a rush of emotions I thought I'd buried a long time ago. That night, it took everything in me not to call. But I didn't. Instead, I dug back into my work. My organization, Blueprint Futures, had just launched its first financial literacy workshop for at-risk youth. It was something I'd built from the ground up, and it gave me purpose far beyond anything I thought I'd ever have. The second message came a week later. We've been following your success online. We're proud of you. Things have been hard for us lately. Can we meet? I laughed out loud. Literally laughed. They didn't say they were sorry. Not once. Just that they were proud now that I was worth something. And things have been hard? You mean after living a dream life without me for 12 years? I ignored the message. But the third time they called. And against my better judgment, I picked up. Hello. My voice was flat. Susan. My mom's voice was almost cheerful. Too cheerful. Oh, honey, it's so good to hear your voice. It's been 12 years, I said. You don't get to call me honey. There was a pause. A tiny crack in her chipper tone. We've fallen on hard times. Your father made a few bad investments, and the economy hasn't helped. I already knew. I had seen the foreclosure notice on their old house when I checked public records months ago, just out of curiosity. I had seen the Facebook updates slow down. No more vacation photos. No more beachside dinners. They were spiraling. And now they remembered I existed. What does this have to do with me? I asked. Another pause. Then she dropped it. We were hoping you could help us out. Maybe just enough to catch up on the mortgage. We know you're doing well. And it's not like we're asking for a lot. I felt something snap inside me. They weren't asking for a lot. Just enough to clean up the mess they'd made after throwing me away. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, I can't help you. You left me. You made your choice. Now live with it. She tried to backpedal. We were young. We were scared. You have to understand. No. I don't, I said, cutting her off. I had to survive on my own. You didn't check in. Not once. You didn't send a birthday card. A Christmas gift. Nothing. So don't act like I owe you now that you're out of options. She fell silent again. And for a moment, I wondered if she was crying. But then came the words I'll never forget. "We're still your parents, Susan." "No," I said, my voice ice. "You're people I used to know." And I hung up. For days afterward, I was torn between rage and guilt. Not because I regretted it, but because some small part of me, the broken child still deep inside, had wanted them to change. To be sorry. To love me. But that wasn't real. What was real were the Millers, the family who never gave up on me. What was real was the community I'd built, the lives I was changing. What was real was me. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. My father's cursive. He started with flattery, how proud he was, how impressive I'd become, how he always believed I had it in me. Then he segued into their dire situation. He even mentioned Lucy, how she was still at home, trying to support them, and how much it meant to him if I could do the right thing. I stared at those words. Do the right thing. The irony nearly made me tear the paper in half. Where was that sentiment when they dumped me at 12? When they chose the right thing for themselves? I didn't reply, but I saved the letter. Not for nostalgia. For proof of just how far I'd come without them. Meanwhile, my work with Blueprint Futures was growing fast. We'd expanded to 3 cities, received funding from a major foundation, and I was invited to speak on panels about financial independence for foster youth. The more I shared my story, the more I healed. And the more I healed, the stronger I became. One evening, after a workshop, a girl named Tasha came up to me. She was 16, sharp-tongued, and trying hard not to cry. "My mom left me last year," she said. "And I thought I'd never get past it. But you did. You're out here doing all this. That means maybe I can too." I hugged her tight. And in that moment, I realized something important. My past didn't define me, but it gave me power. I wasn't just successful. I was free. And my parents? They were finally learning what it felt like to be left behind. I didn't hear from them for another 6 months after the letter. It was peaceful, like the static had finally cleared from a radio that had been blaring in the background my whole life. I focused on the nonprofit, expanded our curriculum, even partnered with a local tech company to build a budgeting app for teens aging out of foster care. But just when I started thinking they might finally stay gone, they found another way back in. This time, it was Lucy. She emailed me. The subject line simply read, "Please." I opened it because, well, she was Lucy. The little sister I never blamed, even when I probably should have. For years, I had resented how easily she slipped into the role of the good one. But I knew now she was also a child caught in a web she didn't weave. The email was short. "Susan. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But they're not doing well. And I don't mean financially, I mean mentally. I don't know what else to do. They won't sell the house. They won't go to counseling. They just keep pretending nothing's wrong and spiraling. They're even talking about you like you're some kind of villain. I know it's unfair. But can we talk? I'm scared. I don't know how much longer I can keep it all together. Asterisk. Lucy." I closed the email and just sat there, hand over my mouth. For a moment, I felt that old instinct to rush in and fix everything, like I used to do when we were kids and she'd cry over scraped knees or nightmares. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was a deep, gaping wound carved by choices made over a decade ago. And it wasn't mine to bandage. Still, I replied, "Lucy. I'm sorry you're in this position. I really am. But I need to be clear, I can't go back. I won't. You have no idea what it took for me to survive being left behind like that. And now they want help not because they've changed, but because they need something. That's not love. That's convenience. If you ever need a place to stay or someone to talk to, I'm here. But I won't be a parachute for them. Not after everything, asterisk. Susan." She didn't reply. Weeks passed. I tried not to think about it. Buried myself in grant applications and planning our summer financial boot camp. But late one Friday night, After wrapping up a budgeting session for recent grads, I opened my social media and saw something I wasn't prepared for. Lucy had posted a photo. My parents, pale, gaunt, and desperate-looking, sitting in a cluttered living room surrounded by unopened bills. The caption read, "Pride comes before the fall. We should have made better choices." The comments were brutal. Some people offered sympathy. Others asked where Susan was, why the successful daughter wasn't helping. As if I was just another selfish rich girl ignoring her struggling family. It crushed me. I hadn't cried in years. Not really. But that night, I locked the office door, curled up on the worn couch in the corner, and wept like the 12-year-old who sat in the back of that car while her life unraveled in silence. Because no matter how far I'd come, no matter how strong I'd become, the scar was still there. I knew what was happening. They were shifting the narrative, playing the sympathy card, trying to turn me into the villain so they didn't have to face the truth, that they had abandoned a child, and now that child had grown into someone who didn't need them. The next morning, I went to the Miller's house, the only real family I had. Mrs. Miller was making cinnamon rolls. Mr. Miller was reading the newspaper like always. They looked up as I walked in, tears still fresh on my face. "I need to ask something," I said, voice trembling. "Did I do the right thing? Was I cruel?" Mrs. Miller put down her spatula, walked over, and held my face in her hands. "Susan," she said gently, "choosing yourself isn't cruelty. It's survival. They threw you away. You didn't burn the bridge, they did. You just decided not to swim across the wreckage to save them." Mr. Miller looked up from the paper. "Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let people feel the weight of their choices." I exhaled, slowly, like I had been holding that breath for years. They were right. I wasn't cruel. I was done. That weekend, I posted my own photo. Not to retaliate, but to reclaim the story. It was a shot of me at the front of the Blueprint Futures office, standing beside a banner that read, "We build what we were denied." The caption? Just one line. "Some families create you. Some families save you. And some families break you so badly, you have to become someone else entirely." The post went viral. Thousands of people shared their own stories of abandonment, betrayal, and redemption. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone in my pain. I wasn't a villain. I was a survivor. And I was just getting started. I didn't expect the post to explode like it did. Within 48 hours, it had racked up over 2 million views, tens of thousands of comments, and hundreds of personal messages. Some thanked me. Some shared their own trauma. And some, strangers, old classmates, even distant relatives, asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. But the one message that stopped me cold? It came from Lucy. Susan. "I saw your post. And I get it. I really do now. I never knew how deep the wound went. You don't owe them anything. I'm not writing to ask for that. But I need to be honest with you. They're planning something. They're desperate. And desperate people, they don't think straight. Dad's talking about suing you for emotional damages. Mom's considering going to the media. They think they can paint you as cruel to get sympathy or maybe even pressure you into helping. I'm sorry. I just thought you should know. Lucy." I stared at the message, my skin going cold. Emotional damages? Public exposure? They were spiraling into the abyss, and they wanted to drag me down with them. It hit me then, harder than ever before. They had never been interested in reconciliation. Only reputation. Only rescue. And now that I had taken control of the narrative, they were trying to steal it back. I took a breath and called the one person I trusted with legal advice, Chelsea, a former foster youth turned pro bono attorney who had spoken at one of our Blueprint workshops. She picked up on the second ring. "They want to sue me," I said, barely keeping my voice steady, "for not helping them." She was quiet for a moment, then let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "They won't win," she said. "But they might embarrass you. Damage your reputation. Unless you act first." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Tell your full story. Not just the emotional version. The facts. The records. The abandonment papers. The social worker reports. Everything they never thought would come to light. That suggestion terrified me. I'd spent years rebuilding. I wasn't sure if I was ready to relive all of it, but Chelsea was right, they were cornered animals now. And if I didn't protect myself, I could lose everything I'd built. So I went into the Blueprint Archive, the place where we kept every form, document, and case study. And I pulled out my own file. There it was. In black and white. Date of placement, July 15th, 2012. Reason for foster entry, voluntary relinquishment due to financial inability to support minor. Signature of legal guardian, Margaret Elizabeth Reynolds and Jack Reynolds. I stared at those signatures, their actual, physical consent to get rid of me. I scanned every page, uploaded it into a private drive. And then I sat down at my laptop and began typing the most difficult thing I had ever written. It started like this. This is the story of how my parents abandoned me at 12 and now want to sue me for not saving them from their own choices. I included the documents. The photos of my first tiny room at the Millers. A copy of my college diploma. And yes, even the messages they sent asking for money. It was raw, real, undeniable. I posted it at midnight. By sunrise, it had gone viral again. But this time, news outlets picked it up. A well-known blog ran an article titled, "Daughter Abandoned by Parents at 12 Builds Nonprofit Empire. Now They Want Her Money." Public opinion turned like a tide. Even Lucy messaged again. They're furious. But also, they've gone quiet. For the first time in months. Maybe now they finally get it. But it wasn't just about silencing them anymore. Something had shifted in me. I was no longer reacting. I was reclaiming. In the days that followed, I was invited to speak at a National Youth Empowerment Summit. People wanted to hear my story, not for drama, but for strength, for resilience, for truth. And at that summit, standing on a stage in front of 3,000 people, I ended my speech with words I had never dared to say out loud before. Family isn't defined by DNA. It's defined by presence. And when the people who made you disappear, you get to decide who you become without them. The room erupted, not with polite applause, but with something deeper. Affirmation. Catharsis. Victory. That night, I got a call from Mrs. Miller. She had watched the speech on live stream. "You always were meant to change the world, Susan," she said. "Even when they tried to keep you small." I cried for the first time in weeks. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of release. I had taken the ashes of my past and built something no one could tear down. And my parents? They were now just a footnote in the origin story of someone they never truly knew. After the summit, everything accelerated. Suddenly, I wasn't just that girl with the viral post. I was being invited to panels, podcasts, and even a morning talk show to speak about financial literacy and resilience for youth who had been discarded, like me. But more than the headlines or cameras, it was the letters that started pouring and that really changed me. Hundreds, then thousands. Teenagers in foster care. Grown adults estranged from their families. People who had lived through abandonment, neglect, cruelty, and came out the other side still searching for peace. Some letters were just a few sentences. Others were several pages. Some wrote about wanting to start over. Others just wanted someone to say, "What happened to you wasn't your fault." And every time I opened one, I thought, this is why I didn't give up. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a lifeline. But just when I thought the past had lost its grip on me, one final echo came back, this time in person. I was at the Blueprint Futures headquarters, reviewing our fall mentorship curriculum, when the front desk assistant buzzed in. Susan? There's someone here to see you. Says she's your mother." I froze. My blood ran cold. It was a name I hadn't heard in years without a buffer of digital distance or court documents. "Send her away," I said quickly. But the assistant hesitated. "She said she won't leave unless she speaks to you. She's crying. Part of me wanted to walk out the back door. Another part, the part one hated, the part still bruised and naive, said, "Face her. You're not that little girl anymore. You're not powerless." So I walked down the stairs. And there she was. Margaret Reynolds. My mother. But not the one I remembered. She looked older than her years. Frail. Her eyes were sunken, and her once perfectly manicured nails were chipped and raw. She was clutching her purse like it was her last possession in the world. "Susan," she said the moment she saw me. Her voice cracked like it hadn't been used in days. I stood with my arms crossed. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," she said immediately. I needed to say something. Not over the phone. Not in a letter. I needed to look you in the eye. I didn't move. Didn't speak. She took a shaky breath. "I was wrong," she whispered. "Everything I did. Everything I let your father do. We chose convenience over compassion. We chose silence over parenting. And we didn't just lose a daughter. We lost someone extraordinary." Her voice broke on that last word. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, eyes full of shame. "And now we're drowning," she said. "We've lost everything. And I know that sounds like karma, and maybe it is. But I needed to see what you became. Even if it's without us." I let her words hang in the air. She was right. It was karma. But I wasn't about to comfort her. "You didn't come to apologize," I said coldly. "You came because your world fell apart, and you thought maybe, just maybe, I could save you." Again. "No," she said quickly, "no." "Yes," I cut her off. "Because if you really wanted forgiveness, you would have started there 12 years ago. You would have shown up before I became someone worth bragging about." Her shoulders sagged under the weight of truth. "I can't give you money," I said. "I won't." "I'm not here for that," she whispered. "But you were," I replied. "And you will be again. You always will be. And I've built a life where I never need to pick up that phone again." She looked up, eyes red. "So that's it?" "Yes," I said. "That's it." She stood there for a few more moments, then slowly turned and walked toward the door. For a second, she looked back. I didn't. I turned around and walked up the stairs. That was the last time I saw her. After that encounter, I made one final decision, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. I went to my attorney and filed a legal no-contact order. I didn't want to leave the door open a crack for guilt to crawl through again. It was closed. Locked. Cemented shut. Because the truth is, some stories don't get a happy ending. Some just end. And that's okay. The real ending, the real happy one, came later that year. At our annual Blueprint Gala, a fundraiser and celebration of everything we'd built, we awarded our very first Rising Phoenix Scholarship. A full ride to any college of the recipient's choosing, along with a 3-year mentorship and startup capital for a business idea. The recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Amira. She walked on stage shaking, holding the oversized check, tears in her eyes. "My mom left me when I was 9, she said into the mic, and I thought that meant I would never be anything. But then I met people who believed in me. People who told me I mattered." She looked at me from the stage. Like Miss Susan. The room erupted in applause. I stood there, hands trembling, because for the first time in my life, I knew what it meant to not just survive, but give back what the world once stole from me. That night, as I walked home under the stars, I thought about that scared little girl sitting in a social worker's office all those years ago. And I whispered to her, "You made it." Some people think the climax of a story is when the villain is defeated, when the bad guys get what's coming to them. But real life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes, the villain isn't just a person. Sometimes it's the echo of old pain. Sometimes it's the lie you were told about your own worth. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is peace. I wish I could tell you that after the gala everything felt perfect. That I never had flashbacks or guilt or nights where I stared at the ceiling wondering if I'd done too much or not enough. But healing doesn't happen in straight lines. The media frenzy died down slowly. My parents stayed quiet after the no-contact order. And Lucy, she eventually reached out again. This time, not through a frantic message or guilt-ridden email. She called. "Hey," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "I don't know if you want to hear from me, but I need to say this." I sat in my office, staring out the window at the streetlights blinking on one by one. "I think I always knew something was wrong," she continued. "Even as a kid. I just didn't want to admit it because it meant admitting our family was broken." She paused. "And I want you to know, I'm proud of you. Not just because of everything you built, but because you did it without becoming bitter. If it were me, I don't know if I could have done the same." I didn't respond right away. My throat was tight. I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I finally whispered. "There's one more thing," Lucy added. "I'm leaving. I'm moving out. I found a job upstate, and I think it's time I stopped pretending they're going to change. I want to start fresh and maybe stay in touch. If you'd be okay with that." I thought of her as a little girl, clinging to my leg, asking me to help her pick out glitter pens or tie her shoes. I had hated her for so long, not because she did anything wrong, but because she was loved the way I wasn't. But now all I felt was sadness. And maybe forgiveness. "I'd like that," I said. For the first time, it felt like a door had opened, not back to the past, but to something new. Something honest. As fall rolled in, the air sharp and crisp, Blueprint Futures hit a milestone. We opened our first transitional housing center for teens aging out of foster care. A place where they could live, learn life skills, receive therapy, and start their adult lives with dignity. I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony holding a pair of gold scissors, the media flashing cameras in front of me. Beside me were Mrs. and Mr. Miller. "We're so proud of you," Mrs. Miller whispered, her hand gently squeezing mine. "You're everything they refuse to see," Mr. Miller added, eyes glistening with pride. And just like that, I knew. This was my family. These were the people who stood in the gaps, who didn't just patch the wounds, but made sure they never bled again. After the ceremony, I was alone in my office, flipping through letters from scholarship recipients, when my assistant buzzed in again. "There's a package here. No return address." I opened it cautiously. Inside was a worn-out composition notebook. My name, Susan, written in loopy, juvenile cursive across the cover. I opened the first page. Age 13. Dear future me. I don't know if you're alive, or if you made it. But if you did, I want you to know I'm trying. Every day. I miss them. But I also hate them. Is that allowed? Is it okay to feel both? My breath caught in my throat. This was my journal from the foster home. The one I thought I'd lost after I moved out to college. There were more pages. Angry rants. Tear-stained entries. Prayers. Dreams. And then the last page, written in my smallest, most fragile handwriting. I don't want to be angry forever. I just want to matter to someone. I closed the book and held it to my chest. I had become everything she prayed for. That night, I sat in the living room at the Millers. We were drinking tea. The fireplace crackled. And for the first time, I read some of those pages aloud. Mrs. Miller wept quietly. Mr. Miller held her hand. And when I finished, Mrs. Miller looked me in the eyes and said, "You've always mattered, Susan. From the moment you walked through that door. No courtroom revenge. No fiery showdown. Just this. Healing, truth, and the quiet, undeniable power of being seen. There's a strange moment that happens when you've fought for something your whole life, and then you finally have it, the peace, the success, the love you never thought you'd earn. The war ends, but you still flinch at the silence. It took me months to fully accept that the chaos was over, that I didn't have to brace myself every time the phone buzzed, or scan every email for hidden guilt. That I no longer owed anything to people who only remembered me when it served their survival. Instead, I started living. Really living. Blueprint Futures expanded into 5 states. Our mentorship program became nationally recognized. We partnered with youth shelters, public schools, even state governments to help implement financial literacy into high school curricula. I was asked to speak at the White House. I even sat on a panel next to the CEO of one of the country's largest banks, telling my story, not as a victim, but as a force. But none of it compared to the simple things, like Sunday dinners at the Millers, or walking through our new youth housing complex and hearing someone say, "That's Miss Susan. She's the reason I believe in myself." Or seeing Lucy visit me one weekend, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, finally free of the house that had once felt so perfect and so poisonous. We sat at my kitchen table, eating leftover Chinese takeout. She looked around, taking in the modest but warm apartment I called home. "You know," she said between bites, "I used to think you were the lucky one." I looked at her, stunned. "What?" "When you left," she continued, "Mom and Dad made it sound like you were going to some terrible place. But they also never talked about you after that. It was like you died." She picked at a spring roll. "But I always wondered where you went, who you became. And when I found out, it broke something in me. Because I realized they didn't abandon you because they had to. They did it because they could." I finished for her. She nodded. "Yeah." Silence settled between us. But it wasn't awkward. It was healing. "You're welcome here," I told her. "But I need to be honest. I'll never go back to being your sister the way I used to be. I'm not that girl anymore." "I don't want you to be," she said. "I just want to know you now." And that felt enough. Later that year, I was nominated for a national award recognizing changemakers under 30. It was surreal, standing on a red carpet, photographers calling my name, media outlets sharing my story under headlines like, "Abandoned at 12. Empowering thousands at 24. But I wasn't doing it for recognition. I was doing it because every time I spoke, I knew someone out there, some scared, forgotten version of me, was listening. At the awards dinner, I stood behind the podium, the lights hot on my face, the room silent. I looked out over the crowd and beyond them into the places I'd come from. "This isn't a story about revenge," I began. "It's a story about reclamation. About taking back what was stolen, not just opportunities, but identity, dignity, hope." I paused, let the weight of it settle. There was a time when I believed I wasn't worth fighting for. When the people who should have loved me the most proved I was disposable. But I stand here now because of those who picked up the pieces, not out of obligation, but out of love. I looked down at the front row, where the Millers sat beaming, hands clasped. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm free. And that is the most powerful thing anyone can be. The room erupted. And in that moment, I knew I had won. Not with money, not with fame, but with truth. In the weeks that followed, I received one final letter. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. My father's. "Susan, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if I even deserve for you to, but I wanted to try. To say, I'm sorry. Not because we're suffering, but because we caused suffering. Yours." I watched your speech, and it made me realize you became everything I wasn't. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best kind of justice. If you never speak to me again, I'll understand. But I wanted you to know, you mattered. You always did. I was just too weak to show it. Jack. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer where I kept my old journal, not as a wound, but as a relic. I didn't need their words anymore. I had written my own ending. And maybe that's what I hope you take away from my story, that you're allowed to cut the cord on pain that pretends to be love. That you can walk away from what breaks you and build something beautiful with what's left. You don't owe your past anything, but you owe your future everything. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this story touched you, please share it. Someone out there needs to hear it. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more stories where pain becomes power and justice speaks louder than blood.